Every excessive hair will be removed. Every drop of ink must be of the right consistency, and every piece of paper will be carefully selected. The movement is repeated countless times until perfection is reached. Knowing China isn't just about seeing its side as a fast-growing, colossal country. Getting to know China is only possible through close contact with the locals. The vast and varied culinary culture, the leisure activities, the spirit of tea drinking. China is an endless series of themes and journeys. However, what really sets China apart from the rest of the world is tradition. The topic of today's video is exploring its traditions through one of the most iconic arts. Calligraphy developed first in countries with logographic writing. A logogram is a symbol that represents an entire word or morpheme. By the 3rd century, there were already Chinese treatises on calligraphy and it was recognized as an art. Calligraphy in Asia is considered an important art, a sophisticated form of painting, and has had a huge impact on the development of the painting technique itself. The specific thing about East Asian calligraphy is that it was studied by the aristocracy for many years to achieve perfection. This art requires maximum concentration and spontaneity in performance and is influenced by the aesthetics and practice of Zen Buddhism, and in Zen itself, it is a means of meditation, a path of knowledge, and a spiritual legacy of the teacher. Traditional East Asian calligraphy uses the so-called 4 treasures or 4 friends, ink brushes, Chinese ink in solid form, an instrument for crushing ink to turn it into a liquid, and special paper. The main parameters determining the final result in the calligrapher's work are the shape, size, and material of the brush hair, the color, and density of the ink, as well as the quality of the paper, its surface and ability to absorb ink. But the technique is most important. The calligrapher determines how much ink he will pick up with the brush and then how he will apply the strokes. The pressure, the angle of the brush, and the direction of movement play a role here. As a result, the spirit of the calligraphy is determined by the speed, accelerations, and decelerations of the hand, reversals, angles, and the order of strokes. Let's go back to tradition. The materials used to make calligraphy are the result of careful selection. Craftsmen who make calligraphic instruments have turned their activity into an art that they pass down through the generations. Thanks to this tradition, families have mastered the specifics of making the individual components needed to create calligraphy. Whole families have dedicated their lives and made the perfect crafting of brushes, inks, etc. into a family tradition and mission, which is why even the most distinguished calligraphers buy their materials only from certain places. Artists spend months turning raw hair into a perfect brush tip. But today, there aren't many skilled brushmakers left. Yoshiyuki Hata is a 3rd-generation brushmaker and has been making calligraphy brushes since he was a teenager. The brushes are most often made with bamboo sticks, and the thickness, volume, and weight of the brush make a difference to the final result. For a master calligrapher like Daiso Kaneko, small differences in a brush hardness or ink retintation can drastically affect the lines it can produce. Millions of repetitions are necessary for the craftsman to gain complete control over the brush, so any imperfection in the handle's workmanship would change the final result. The dozens of steps involved in brushmaking start with selecting the hair. Different types of hair have a big impact on the price of a brush. Yoshiyuki's specialty is one of the priciest, goat hair. Selecting high-quality hair is done entirely by eye, and it's one of the hardest skills for a new brushmaker to learn. This long process is just beginning. Once the hairs are chosen, they are boiled and combed to remove any fluff. One of the most time-consuming steps is aligning all of these hairs. This delicate work is key to make a uniform brush. Throughout the process, brushmakers patiently remove any imperfect or damaged hairs. At this stage, Yoshiyuki's vision for a brush starts to take shape. Then he dips the hair in funori, an adhesive fluid made from seaweed, to hold the hairs together. Once the hair dries, Yoshiyuki ties up the ends and burn each one with a hot iron, binding the hairs together. Any mistake here could ruin a month of work. Finally, it is time to assemble the brush. Hata Bunshindu brushes often cost around $13,000, but some brushes can cost a lot more. Despite the high price, these brushes are essential tools for calligrapher like Daiso. He followed in the footsteps of his father and grandfather and has been practicing calligraphy for 20 years. Calligraphy ink, also known as sumi, is traditionally sold in the form of handmade solid ink sticks. To use the dry ink stick, calligraphers rub it on an ink stone to mix it with water. Sumi ink is typically black. It can also be tinted brown or blue. The ingredients are simple: soot, animal glue, and perfume. But the quality of these materials and the time-intensive techniques required to collect and produce them have a large impact on the final price. It starts in this room, lit by 100 oil lamps, where artisans produce all the soot they require to make ink. The workers carefully manage the vegetable oil in the lamps and gradually collect soot throughout the day. This process is called catching smoke. Every day artisans light all lamps and cover each with a lid, the underside of which collects soot as the oil burns. These lamps contain rapeseed oil, the most common choice when producing high-grade ink sticks. Then there is the binding agent, animal glue. For most expensive ink sticks, artisans sometimes mix in other types of glue, such as donkey, deer, and goat. Master says this improves the ink glossiness and texture. They dissolving the glue slowly at a low temperature is key to producing quality ink. The next step is to knead the soot, glue, and fragrance into a soft dough. The dough is kneaded every morning by hand and foot. The workers takes care to knead it thoroughly, so the soot and glue are evenly distributed. That way, the solid stick can eventually dissolve into homogeneous liquid ink. Once he has properly kneaded the dough, worker cuts it into balls and weighs for consistency. Then he places the balls into molds and uses a machine to press them into shape. Drying the ink sticks too quickly will cause them to crack, making them unsellable. So artisans rely on a traditional technique, using oak ash to slowly absorb moisture from the sticks over a long period of time. They start by covering the sticks in moist ashes. Each day swap yesterday ashes with drier ones. They repeat this process for up to 40 days, until the ink sticks are about 70% dry. After they hang the sticks with straw and air dry them in-house for up to 6 months. Properly drying and maturing an ink stick takes at least 4 years. The longer the sticks dry and age, the better they perform and the more expensive they become. There are ink sticks hundreds of years old. Finally, artisans polish them and apply the finishing touches. Now they are ready to be sold to calligraphers. Calligraphers traditionally prefer ink sticks to liquid ink. But in order to write with a Sunni ink stick, he must first transform it into a liquid. This requires an inkstone and water. The calligraphers mixes the two to make the liquid ink, adding more water or more dry ink until they gets the consistency they needs. As in any other art, the most ancient masters of calligraphy became famous for their work. The most revered of all calligrapher masters are Wang Ziji, Zhao Mengfu, Li Bai, etc. Apart from China, the art of calligraphy has its manifestations in many other countries. Japanese calligraphy emerged around the 7th century based on Chinese styles. Subsequently, the Japanese created 2 new styles that are distinguished by their simplicity and emotionality. Japanese logograms denote whole concepts, have a deep philosophical meaning, and have the ability to form a structural image perception in the viewer. A 400-year-old national treasure is on display in the main hall of Kenninji Temple, Kyoto's oldest Zen temple. This painting by Satatsu Tavaraya, titled Gods of Wind and Thunder, depicts 2 celestial beings. One carrying a large bag of winds and the other a drum that creates thunder. Next to this work, a calligraphic representation of this masterpiece from 2006 hangs in the temple. With the Chinese characters for God of Thunder and God of Wind drawn in black ink on a huge white background. The work is intriguing for several reasons. The lyrical symmetry of the 2 compositions is surprising because the calligrapher Shoko Kanazawa had never seen Tavaraya's piece before putting the ink to paper. Kanazawa is no ordinary calligrapher. She has Down syndrome and she is one of Japan's most known young contemporary calligraphers. From the 7th to the 14th century, the Japanese adapted and modified the techniques of Chinese calligraphy according to their needs. Ono no Mishikes began creating what are believed to be the first true Japanese calligraphic forms. Islamic calligraphy occupies a special place in Islamic art and arose in the process of copying the Quran. For this reason, the written word in itself acquires a sacred meaning. In the words of Qazi Ahmed ibn Murmanshi al-Hussein, from the 16th century, the mystical attitude to the written word in the Muslim East turned the very process of copying the Quran into an act closely related to the religious dogma of forgiveness of sins. There are copies of the Quran that are considered priceless because of the overall layout of the book itself. Also, in the past, craftsmen only used ink that has been in Mecca. Hebrew calligraphy. A specific form of Jewish calligraphy is microcalligraphy or macrocalligraphy, which developed in the 9th century and has parallels in Christianity and Islam. With it, miniature Hebrew letters are written, which are used to build larger geometric and abstract shapes. Thus, by writing a small text, an image is created, which, viewed from afar, is only perceived as an image, but up close, the text that makes it up can also be read. European calligraphy also has many paths that have developed over the years. The two main ones are the Western and Eastern European masters. The main characteristic of the Western European style is that the words are written in Latin, which is considered a dead language. The Latin alphabet developed from the Phoenician through the Greek and Etruscan alphabets. Eastern European calligraphy uses the Glagolitic and later Cyrillic alphabets, named after its discoverer, the Bulgarian theologian and enlightener, Saint Kirill. European calligraphy has undergone many changes throughout the ages, but in its essence, it changed the most during the Renaissance, when Johann Gutenberg created the first printing press. He began to circulate editions, and the art remained only for the moment when the first one was made for a matrix from which many identical editions are then printed. While the rest of the world is gradually moving towards reproduction, in Asia over the years more and more attention has been paid to skillful handcrafting. To this day, Asians do calligraphy as the ancient masters did it 1,000 years ago. They turn the whole accompanying activity into a cult and add more and more sacred and philosophical meaning to what plants to collect to make ink, the careful selection of each hair from which they make the brushes to the very act of calligraphy. Of course, the persistence, fantasy, and emotion that master calligraphers put into their works find their reflection in modern times. Nowadays, calligraphy is used as the basis of several computer fonts and increasingly appears in graphic design. And if you have not found your calling, then nothing prevents you from trying a little of this art, which trains the mind and the hand and which will give you a wonderful opportunity for self-expression and inevitably arouses admiration. If you liked the video, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, or share it with people who would also like it. This will be a sign for us that we are doing something worthwhile.